Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny,
And I'm Matt.
and today we're going to talk about the Rules Cyclopedia for Dungeons and Dragons. This is not a new product. This came out in 1991.
So I got a copy, I got a PDF, and I started reading through it, and I was amazed. This book is not at all what I thought it was going to be. First of all, I think it's got a terrible title
Yes.
because, it's called the Rules Cyclopedia, cyclopedia being like a fancy, smashy word for encyclopedia for some reason. So I thought it was just going to be a collection of odds and end rules gathered through all the basic box sets, which it is, but it's structured as a complete game. This is a distillation of all of basic. It is an amazing product. This book is it's like a DMG plus a player's handbook plus a monster's manual plus two settings with maps and character sheets. This is amazing. If you wanted basic, if you were really interested in basic D&D and all the different iterations, so you could find all the different box sets, or you could buy this book, which is all of them put together, which is really incredible. There's so much in this book.
Yes.
I can't believe it.
So I think I told you this story before. So when I first encountered this book back in 1991, I was looking for more rules for second edition D&D. And I saw this and I figured, oh, okay. And reading the back, I thought maybe it was a continuation or a compilation of all the stuff going on in second edition D&D.
Right.
And I was very wrong.
Yes, you were.
Yeah, I dislike the title. I agree with you. It should have been called like some sort of like, I don't know, a compilation of basic D&D or D&D basic complete or something like that.
Something that actually tells you it's a game, like an entirely complete game, and not just a reference book.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember getting this and I was kind of disappointed and confused, like what is going on. At the time, of course, I didn't know that about the history of D&D, like they were, it was before first edition. Back then we didn't have internet, and
in the 80s and the 90s, Dungeons and Dragons was so confusing. I don't want to sound like a grumpy old man or anything, but kids today, they don't know they're born. They don't know how easy it is. There's fifth edition, one type of D&D, that's all that's being published. Back in the day, you had different types of D&D being published at the same time and overlapping. Oh, so confusing.
Yeah. So just like what Matt said, while second edition was just starting or in the midst of starting, during that whole time, TSR was still producing basic D&D and continuing it with first a basic box set, then expert, and I believe the next two were champion, master, and immortal, which
I think that's right. Yeah.
Characters can go all the way up to level 36, certain characters at least. But I have to say that despite the shock of what this book was really about, there's still some great stuff in it that I appreciated. Like there's a section in the back that you can convert creatures and characters from this game to second edition D&D. So that kind of softened the blow. I didn't feel like I wasted money for nothing. But yeah, this book is over 300 pages. It's totally complete. If you want to play the old school D&D.
It is actually, now that I think about it, the most complete gaming book that D&D has ever put out, right? Because aside from the box sets, and even those usually had one or two books in them, if you wanted to buy the books, you had to buy a player's handbook, a DMG, and a monster's manual.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all three in one book.
Yes.
Buy one book and you've got an entire game, which is really amazing. So I was looking up on the great Drive-Through RPG. I was reading about it. and really interesting. So basic D&D was actually the longest running version of D&D. So it depends on whether you start counting basic when the white books came out in 74, or if you start counting in the Holmes basic in 77. But even in 77, it's still the longest running version of D&D they had. But in the 90s, in the 80s, the late 80s, sales were really flagging and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was taking off. I think that's because TSR was really bad at kind of marketing and naming things. I mean, if you call one game basic and one game advanced, you're kind of saying, oh yeah, this is the little kiddie game with trainer wheels, and this is the really cool game for the people who are serious, which is really an unfair way of looking at it. But anyway, that's what they named them. So basic was falling off, and this tremendous concentration of basic D&D was actually the last D&D product, or one of the last. So it was right at the end of the product. It was like their last swan song was this great book. So as you said, a lot of characters go up to level 36, which just kind of boggles my mind. That's a completely different way of playing the game. I mean, I had a character, the highest I ever got was a 22nd level mage, and he retired. I was just bored. I was making up new magic items to pass the time of day and hanging out with goddesses and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Yeah. So I have no idea what the game looks like at level 36.
No, I don't think I've ever gone or had to play a campaign that high level before.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see that. So for those of you that may not remember about basic or maybe even heard about how basic was played, but it had race as class. So a lot of them did not go beyond 10, 12 maybe.
Yeah, the demi-humans, sometimes they went to 8 or 10. Yeah.
And they allowed like if you gain more experience, instead of gaining levels, you may get like a certain skills. I believe you get like certain fighter abilities and thieves abilities later on in levels.
Yeah, it was really kind of weird.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird. Again, kind of belying the name basic. This was a supreme example of rules creep. Right? You went from a very basic game and ended up with this pretty complicated game with all these rules. And there were a lot of really interesting things. A couple notes I took down. Druids were not their own class. What happens is a neutral cleric who reaches 9th level can choose to abandon civilization and go out into the woods and become a druid, which was really interesting. Little things like it doesn't say a nature-based cleric, it just says any neutral cleric.
Yeah.
You can just say, oh, I'm a neutral cleric studying books, and you know what? Now I hate reading. I'm going to go live in the woods. Yes, sure. There was a class called the Mystic, which I'd never actually heard of, which is a lot like the Monk. So they're all about martial arts and thieves' abilities, and they have some mystical powers like heal self and speak with anyone, and the kind of a Vulcan nerve pinch.
Yeah.
It was pretty interesting. They had weapon mastery rules, so you could learn to master certain weapons, and they had all these other fighting techniques that fighters could use. They had defensive maneuvers and awe-inspiring displays. Right? You could whip out your sword and do something so fancy that it forced a morale check on the opponent. I thought it was pretty funny. They had a system for large-scale battles between armies and things. And they even had a name for the system. It was called the War Machine. Great. They had fantastic rules for encounters and invasions. So evasions and pursuits. So like if you're going through a dungeon and one, you or the NPCs decide to run away, the other group can pursue. And then they had this kind of table that you rolled on based on how many people were in each party and a few other things. So I thought that was kind of interesting that you could do that. Yeah.
So just to piggyback what you said, I remember when I first got the book, and then after, again, my initial disappointment and seeing that there were conversion rules, there's a lot of really cool things about this book that really helped me out. You mentioned mass combat. At the time when we were playing, I remember that I couldn't find. There might be in the DMG second edition actually there. I didn't see it at the time. But I was looking for rules for mass combat, and it had some pretty decent, straightforward rules for mass combat, which I thought it worked really well. You just kind of it's like percentile dice. You just kind of have to guess, not guess, but you add in like certain modifiers like terrain,
quality of troops and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you just make a roll and see who has, I think, the highest of the two. And then there's some math involved. But at least there were some rules about that, because at the time where I was trying to figure out how armies work, and I was trying to find an easier rule system for that. And yes, fighters also at 10th level, I believe, they get choice depending on their alignment and certain other factors. They could be a paladin, they could be a knight. They have some. It's interesting when most of the classes, when they reach a certain level, you can choose to be like a traveling version of your character or land. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So in a lot of the basic games, they talk about a stronghold. Like you reach 9th level, it usually is, and you can build a stronghold. But in here, they expanded that. You can build a stronghold, or you can be a traveling cleric or a traveling fighter, and you roam around doing, which sounds a lot like what you were doing before you got to 9th level myself, to be honest. I mean, sounds like adventuring, but so they had all these different ways of playing the game on higher levels. They had a whole section on NPCs and dealing with characters in authority, how princes and kings would relate to the characters and all this stuff. And it even had a section on royal titles and forms of address, how you address a duke. So that was pretty, I think a lot of people forget how useful that stuff was in an age before the internet. Right now, if what's the form of address for a lord, for a viscount? Okay, there it is. Now I know. But, back in my day, if we didn't know something, we just had to not know it, or, look it up in the encyclopedia or pedal down to the library or something, so having it just in a book was really useful.
So if you're anyone out there is interested in taking a look at the book, you can pick this up at Drive-Thru RPG. You could get the PDF, or you could get the print copy. And unfortunately, I don't have the original book anymore. It's lost to time. But this is the Drive-Thru RPG copy. It's scanned. It's not a digital to print. It's scanned to print. So it may not make a difference to you, honestly. But someone that's done, like myself, that's been involved in the print industry, as someone, you can see the difference. But it's a good quality book. It looks nice. It holds up well. There's no color. Well, this is a duotone book, which is weird. Most books are not duotone. Usually they're either black and white or color. And what I mean by duotone is that it's mostly black and white and green, except for the maps. Okay. And let's talk about the maps a little bit. I mean,
yes,
for anyone that's looking at this for the first time, that might be used to the new maps that are out there. They may look at what's in the Rules Cyclopedia and think like, oh, that's okay. But for me, when I first looked at this, it made a big difference, because I didn't know how to make maps when I first.
Maps are fantastic. I just can't say it enough. There's so much in this book. So not only you get all of that, you get 2 settings. You get the known world, which was the setting that was kind of built up through BASIC. So it's all been condensed here. They don't really add much to it, but they bring it all together. And you get a brief overview of Hollow World. It's not as much as you get in the box set, but it does talk about it. So that's a lot. to get, and the maps are beautiful. I mean, they're really, really nice. So if you did want the actual version, you can look on, there's a couple sites out there. There's Noble Knight Games, I think they're called, and eBay. So I did some brief looking, and I found the copies from like $260 or something, all the way down to, I found one for $18. But then there was $16 shipping for some reason, because they insisted on shipping it like really quickly.
Yeah.
Can I get it in a couple weeks? I mean, I'm in no hurry, but they only have one shipping version. So that all came out to about $40. But still, that's a wide range, you know. So you find it out there. And occasionally you can still find, if you have a flag, you know, you can still find copies of this floating around.
I'm sure I've seen this at like local conventions as well. Like I'll see it and pop up here and there.
It's got lots and lots of monsters. I had a quick count. I had over 100 monsters, plus a whole range of dragons. You know, all the regular dragons, plus all the weird dragons, plus like the Pearl Dragon, which is the ruler of all the chaotic dragons, and then what's Diamond Dragon, who's the ruler of the lawful dragons or something.
You know, if I may add to what you're talking about for monsters. So at the time with second edition Dungeons and Dragons, if you remember, they had the binders for them.
I used to have the binders.
Yes. Yeah. Now at the time, again, I didn't know much about what was going on, so I'll pick like a random set of like monsters. It could be like companion number 3, Carator, and I wouldn't know what that was, and added in, and I'm like, okay, this is good. But like, it'd be great to have some like the basic monsters, like the monsters that D&D is well known for. And this is what they have here, which was, again, there was another great thing that I was glad to have this, because it had, you know, it had the beholder, the dragon, and so forth, so that I could give my players like, you know, you know, if you haven't fought a beholder in D&D, what's going on? You know?
Yeah. Things are so different back again. You know, put on my beard and my cane. Things were so different back in the day, because you could buy the books that your local store sold, and that's it. I mean, you could jump on Amazon and look through their catalog and buy whatever you wanted. So if you said, "Oh, I go to the gaming store, I buy some D&D," you've got to buy what they have, and what they've got is they've got second edition, but they've got, you know, a first edition module and a basic monster manual. So I think so many of us were playing a hodgepodge of editions. You know, I was, you know, I didn't even understand all the editions. I didn't even know basic was a thing. I thought there was first edition and second edition for a long time. I was like, wait, what? Another D&D? I'm confused. So, but
and there was no one to really explain it. I mean,
there was nobody around to explain it to you.
If you had the person that was at the store at the time, they knew, that would be a great help. But sometimes if it's like another kid at the register, good luck.
Exactly. And you had the Dragon magazines. You can try to make some sense out of it, but it was sometimes it was difficult to know what was going on. Yeah. And so this game it doesn't have all the complete rules for the Immortals, but it talks about the Immortals. So the Immortals were godlike beings that were involved in the cosmic struggle, which subtly influenced mortal affairs. So, you know, a lot of people talk about D&D, especially basic D&D's alignments, right? And they say, well, what's going on here? Why do we got this law, neutral, chaos, just the 3 alignments? And they think that's kind of weird, and it is kind of weird, but I think you've got to remember that it helps if you realize that it was kind of based on some books. It was influenced by the Moorcock's Eternal Champion, I believe, and it was also influenced by Paul Anderson's, I can't remember the name. I'll have to look it up for you. Something about lions and hearts or something. Anyway, so in those books, there is a cosmic struggle going on between law and order, between the forces of law and chaos, I mean. and most people aren't really kind of aware of it. And I think the way D&D was kind of set up was that there was this overarching conflict which happened at a level far above your player characters. But as your player characters got higher and higher in level, you got closer and closer to this cosmic struggle until in the Immortal rule set, you could actually become an immortal and join this cosmic struggle. Yeah, it's crazy. You've got to get to 30th level, and then you have to find an immortal to sponsor you, and then you've got to choose a path to immortality, and there's all these tests and quests and challenges. and then in the book it says when you reach immortality, you retire. Unless the game is about the Immortals, which is beyond the scope of this book. This book is a window into a different way of playing D&D. So much of it is familiar, but so much of it is just a little different. Like the demi-humans all have relics, which is a artifact specific to their race, right? That's really important. It's like the center of their race. And it has all these magical powers, and there's a keeper who guards it and everything. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure how that translates into the game. I mean, is one of your players going to be the keeper of the Great Dwarven Forge? Maybe he is. I mean, if you're playing a game that goes up so many levels, but it was really interesting. It was a fascinating book. So is this worth getting? Do you like D&D history? Yes, definitely. Do you want a complete game ready to go? Sure. It's a great source book if you play basic. If you play old school essentials, for instance, it's got all sorts of monsters and magical items that aren't in OSC. My favorite was the hurricane lamp. It's a lamp, and it's sitting there closed. It's one of those, you can open it up and get to the candle. So if you open it up, a hurricane blast comes out and blows you all down the hallway. But if you can manage to sneak up and close the door, then you can use it as a lantern, and you can open the door and blow other people away in a hurricane. A hurricane lamp. That's so cute.
Again, to piggyback what you said, yes, I would have said the same thing. If you want if you don't want to search on eBay for all the 5 different box sets, but you kind of know what basic is, and who knows, maybe play it someday, especially if you play Old School Essentials or some sort of other OSR game. Definitely, this is probably a good one to check out and get and complete for your collection. Plus, again, you could just get the print on demand from Drive to RPG if you want it right away, or the PDF. Another thing also, you mentioned OSC, Old School Essentials. I thought if you're looking for, Old School Essentials, there's a cap in levels at a certain point.
Yes.
If you want to homebrew beyond that, this may give you some ideas of where to go, if you're interested in that.
Yeah, I also think, not even homebrew. I think you should be able to just plug this in directly. I mean, if Old School Essentials is an exact clone of Basic, which it is, at least the classic version, not the advanced fantasy stuff, but the classic version is just Basic. So you should be able to just, when you reach the end of when you reach like level 14 as a mage and you want to go to level 15, I'll break out the rule encyclopedia and see what happens.
Funny enough, I wish more people would know about it, because sometimes I'll mention to people about basic D&D, and they don't know about this book. They think like, oh, I'd like to try it out. I don't want to. Where do I get the box sets and so forth? And it's right here. All of it's right here.
Right here, right in that book. That's something. Well, yeah, there you go. Rules Encyclopedia. Rules Cyclopedia.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description below, so you can check it out yourself. Matt, do you have any last words?
I want to say something witty, but I can't think of it. So no. Nope, I don't have anything. They can't all
we
be
should
good ones.
we should have bought a joke cyclopedia for this show.
Yeah, a joke like yes, I do have one last thing. This picture has some art in it, obviously. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good art. Some of it's evocative, some of it's better than others. There's an elf who looks like she's wearing pajamas. But there's this one picture. I think it's in the evasion and pursuit section of these two characters in a dungeon who come running around the corner and just run smack into each other. It's right at the moment of impact with the two characters and run into each other. It's really hilarious. It reminded me that the old D&D books, the text could get very Gygaxian and very serious and everything, and then there'd be this really silly little cartoon in the corner of the guys dressed up as mice, infiltrating the rat cult and all the other stuff. Old D&D was so much fun. It's such a good sense of humor. But anyway, yes. So well worth your time. Yes. Thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.